The man opened his eyes to a world he did not recognize, staring up at wooden beams crossed with shadows while pain thundered through his skull like a stampede of wild horses. He tried to move and found his limbs heavy, unresponsive, and when he attempted to remember how he had come to be lying in this unfamiliar bed, he found nothing but emptiness where his memories should have been. The door creaked open, and a woman stepped inside carrying a basin of water, her dark hair pulled back in a simple braid, her eyes the color of prairie grass in summer. "You are awake," she said, setting the basin on a small table beside the bed. Her voice held a note of relief mixed with caution. "I was beginning to wonder if you would ever open your eyes again." He tried to speak, but his throat was dry as desert sand. She seemed to understand and brought a cup of water to his lips, supporting his head with surprising gentleness. The cool liquid soothed his throat, and he managed to croak out a single word. "Who?" "My name is Willa Turner," she said, settling into a chair beside the bed. "I found you 3 days ago on the road outside Sweetwater. Your horse was standing over you like a guardian angel, and you had blood matted in your hair from a nasty gash. No identification, no papers, nothing to tell me who you might be." He searched his mind desperately, reaching for anything that might tell him his own name, where he came from, what he had been doing on that road. The effort made his head pound worse, and he grimaced. "Do not push yourself," Willa said quickly. "The doctor said you took a serious blow to the head. He mentioned that sometimes memory comes back in time, sometimes it does not. For now, you need to rest and heal." "My name," he whispered. "I do not know my own name." Something flickered across her face, sympathy perhaps, or understanding of a particular kind of loss. "We found some items in your saddlebag, a few coins, some supplies for traveling, and a letter addressed to someone named Jacob Frost. We assumed that might be you, though we cannot be certain." Jacob Frost. The name meant nothing to him, sparked no recognition, but he supposed it was better than nothing at all. "Jacob," he repeated, testing the sound of it. "The doctor is fairly certain you will make a full recovery, physically at least," Willa continued. She wrung out a cloth in the basin and gently pressed it to his forehead. "You are in my home. I run a small boarding house here in Sweetwater, Texas. It is April of 1882, in case you were wondering about that too." He absorbed this information, trying to anchor himself to something solid in a world that felt like shifting sand. April 1882. Sweetwater, Texas. Willa Turner, Jacob Frost, possibly his name. These facts were all he had. "Why did you bring me here?" he asked. "Why not leave me for the marshal or take me to a doctor's office? Dr. Hendricks makes his rounds, and he has already been here twice to check on you. As for the marshal, well..." She paused, wringing out the cloth again. "A man with no memory and no papers is in a vulnerable position. I thought you deserved a chance to get your bearings before facing too many questions. Sweetwater is a good town, but it has its share of rough characters like any frontier settlement. Not everyone would give you the benefit of the doubt." There was something in the way she said it that made him think she spoke from experience, that perhaps she too understood what it meant to be vulnerable and alone. He studied her face, noting the fine lines around her eyes that suggested she was perhaps 25 or 26 years old, and the set of her jaw that spoke of determination and strength. "Thank you," he said, and meant it deeply. "I am in your debt." "You can thank me by getting well," she replied, standing up and smoothing her skirts. "I will bring you some broth in a bit. You need to eat something to get your strength back." Over the following days, Jacob slowly regained his physical strength. He could sit up without the room spinning, could stand and walk a few steps, then a few more. Willa proved to be a capable and patient nurse, bringing him meals, changing the bandage on his head wound, never pressing him with questions he could not answer. Her boarding house was modest but clean, with 4 rooms she rented to travelers and workers passing through Sweetwater. Currently, he was her only guest. "Business is slow this time of year," she explained one evening as she brought him dinner on a tray. "Most of the drovers and cowboys come through in summer with the cattle drives. Spring and fall are quiet times." "How long have you been running this place?" Jacob asked, grateful to focus on something outside his own empty past. 2 years now," Willa said, settling into the chair she had occupied so often during his recovery. "My husband left it to me when he died. We had only been married 8 months when a fever took him. He was a good man, much older than I was, and I think he knew his health was failing when he proposed. He wanted to make sure I would be taken care of." "I am sorry for your loss," Jacob said quietly. She gave him a small smile. It was 3 years ago. The grief has dulled to a manageable ache. Some days I hardly think of it at all, and then something will remind me, and it is fresh again. But that is the nature of loss, I suppose. We learn to carry it. Jacob wondered what losses he might be carrying, what grief or joy or love existed in the blank space of his past. Did he have a wife somewhere, worried about his absence? Parents? Children? The uncertainty gnawed at him. "The letter that was addressed to Jacob Frost," he said. "May I see it?" Willa hesitated, then nodded. "I will fetch it for you." She returned a moment later with a creased envelope. Jacob opened it with trembling fingers and pulled out a single sheet of paper. The handwriting was neat and feminine. "Dear Jacob," it read, "I hope this letter finds you well. Mother's condition has worsened, and the doctor says it is only a matter of time now. I know you and she never saw eye to eye, but I thought you should know. If you wish to come, you would be welcome. If not, I understand. Your sister, Margaret." Jacob read the letter 3 times, searching for any spark of recognition. Margaret, mother. The words were just words, attached to no faces, no feelings, no memories. He looked up at Willa with frustration written on his face. "Nothing?" she asked gently. "Nothing," he confirmed. "I wish I could remember. I wish I knew if I went to see her, this mother of mine, or if I turned away. I wish I knew what kind of man I am." "You are a man who says please and thank you," Willa said firmly. "A man who has been patient and kind, despite being in a terrible situation. That tells me something about your character, regardless of what you can or cannot remember." Her words warmed something in his chest, a small flame against the cold uncertainty of his situation. He found himself watching her as she moved about the room, noticing the efficient grace of her movements, the way she tucked a stray lock of hair behind her ear when she was concentrating. There was something deeply calming about her presence. By the end of his first week in her care, Jacob was able to move about the boarding house freely. His head wound was healing well, the angry red gash fading to pink new skin beneath Willa's careful ministrations. Dr. Hendricks had pronounced himself satisfied with Jacob's physical recovery, though he could offer no insight into when or if his memories might return. "The mind is a mystery," the doctor had said, packing up his medical bag. "I have seen men recover from blows like yours with full memory intact, and I have seen others who never remember a thing. You will have to be patient and see what time brings." Patience was easier said than practiced. Jacob found himself studying every person who passed by the boarding house, searching their faces for any sign of recognition. He walked the streets of Sweetwater, hoping something would trigger a memory. The town was small but thriving, with a main street that boasted a general store, a saloon, a church, a blacksmith, and various other establishments serving the needs of ranchers and townsfolk. Nothing looked familiar. "I need to find work," Jacob told Willa one morning over breakfast. "I cannot continue to impose on your hospitality without paying my way." "You are not imposing," Willa said, but he could see the flash of relief in her eyes. Money was clearly tight for her, and feeding an extra mouth for over a week had to be straining her resources. "Nevertheless, I need to do something useful," Jacob insisted. "I have been examining my hands and they are calloused, so I must have worked with them. I seem to know my way around horses. Perhaps I could find work at the livery stable or one of the nearby ranches." Willa considered this, sipping her coffee thoughtfully. "The Rocking M Ranch about 5 miles outside town is always looking for hands. The foreman, Buck Morrison, is a fair man. I could introduce you if you like." "I would appreciate that," Jacob said. That afternoon, they rode out together on horses borrowed from the livery. Jacob found that he sat a horse with natural ease, his body remembering even if his mind did not. The Texas landscape spread out around them, vast and open, dotted with mesquite and prickly pear cactus. The sun beat down hot and steady, and the air smelled of dust and distant rain. The Rocking M proved to be a sprawling operation, with a large ranch house, several outbuildings, and extensive corrals. Buck Morrison was a weathered man in his 50s with keen eyes and a firm handshake. He listened to Willa's explanation of Jacob's situation without interruption. "Man with no memory, huh?" Buck said, rubbing his grizzled jaw. "That is a hell of a thing. You any good with cattle?" "I honestly do not know," Jacob admitted, "but I am willing to work hard and learn whatever I do not already know." Buck studied him for a long moment. then nodded. I like honesty. I will give you a trial period. Week or two, see how you do. Pay is $30 a month plus meals when you are working. You will be bunking in the boarding house still. If Miss Turner will continue to have me, Jacob said, glancing at Willa. My rates are reasonable, Willa said with a small smile. I am sure we can work something out. So Jacob began his new life, or perhaps the continuation of an old life he could not remember. He rose before dawn each day and rode out to the rocking M, where he threw himself into the work of a ranch hand. His body did seem to know things his mind had forgotten. He could rope a steer with reasonable accuracy, could mend a fence line, could read the weather and the clouds gathering on the horizon. The other ranch hands were a mixed group, some friendly, some reserved, but they accepted him readily enough once they saw he was willing to pull his weight. In the evenings he would return to Sweetwater and to Willa's boarding house, tired and sore, but feeling the satisfaction of a day's honest work. Willa would have dinner waiting, and they would sit together at her small kitchen table, talking about their days. She was surprisingly easy to talk to, with a dry sense of humor and an intelligent curiosity about the world. She read voraciously, borrowing books from the small lending library the church maintained, and she would tell him stories from whatever she was reading. He found himself looking forward to these evening conversations more than anything else in his strange new life. You are a good listener, Willa observed one night as she cleared their plates. I feel like I have been talking your ear off about this novel I'm reading. I enjoy hearing you talk, Jacob said honestly. You make everything sound interesting. She flushed slightly at the compliment, and he realized with some surprise that he found her beautiful. Not in a showy, obvious way, but in the quiet strength of her features, the intelligence in her eyes, the way she moved through the world with confidence and purpose. He was drawn to her in a way that felt both new and somehow inevitable. Spring deepened into early summer. Jacob's trial period at the Rocking M extended into permanent employment as Buck Morrison found him to be a reliable and skilled worker. The ranch was preparing for a major cattle drive north to Dodge City, Kansas, and the work was intense and demanding. Jacob threw himself into it, grateful to have something to occupy his mind, besides the frustrating emptiness of his past. One evening in late May, he returned to the boarding house to find Willa in the small garden behind the building, attacking weeds with what looked like barely controlled fury. Her face was flushed and there were tear tracks on her cheeks. Willa, he said, concerned, what has happened? She looked up at him, and he saw anger and hurt warring in her expression. The bank called in my loan, she said flatly. Apparently the terms have changed, and I need to pay back the full amount by the end of August, or they will foreclose on the property. Jacob felt anger rise in his own chest. Can they do that? Can they just change the terms? They claim my husband signed an agreement that allowed for such changes under certain circumstances, Willa said bitterly. I do not remember any such agreement, but I was so distraught after he died that I may have missed something. Or they may be lying. Either way, I need to come up with $300 in 3 months, or I lose everything. $300 was a substantial sum. Jacob did quick calculations in his head. His wages were good, but nowhere near enough to help significantly in that time frame. There must be something we can do, he said. Some way to fight this. The bank president is a man named Cyrus Dalton, and he has been trying to buy this property from me for over a year, Willa said, yanking up another weed with unnecessary force. He wants to expand the bank building, and my lot is perfectly positioned. I keep refusing to sell, so now he is forcing my hand. That is not right, Jacob said, fury making his voice hard. That is theft dressed up in legal language. Welcome to the reality of being a woman trying to run a business alone, Willa said tiredly. She sat back on her heels and wiped her forehead, leaving a smudge of dirt. I thought I could make this work. I thought if I just worked hard enough, was smart enough, careful enough, I could build something stable and secure. But men like Dalton see a woman alone, and they see weakness, an easy target. Jacob knelt beside her in the dirt, taking one of her soil-stained hands in his. You are not weak, and you are not alone. We will find a way through this. She looked at him with surprise and something else, something that made his heart beat faster. Why? She asked softly. Why do you care so much? I am just the woman who happened to find you on the road. You are not just anything, Jacob said firmly. You saved my life, and you gave me a home when I had nothing, not even my own name. You are the first real thing I remember, the foundation of whatever this new life is going to be. Let me help you." Tears spilled over and ran down her cheeks. "I do not want to lose this place." "Ah," she whispered. "It is all I have left of the life I tried to build." "You will not lose it," Jacob promised, though he had no idea how he would keep that promise. They sat together in the garden as the sun set, not speaking, just drawing comfort from each other's presence. Jacob realized that somewhere in the past weeks, Willa had become essential to him. She was his anchor, his home, the person who mattered most in the world he was building from nothing. The realization should have been frightening in its intensity, but instead it felt right, like a piece clicking into place. Over the following days, Jacob and Willa strategized about how to raise the money. She could take in more boarders if they came, but there was no guarantee of that. She could sell some of her late husband's belongings, but they had little value. Jacob worked extra hours when he could, taking on additional tasks at the ranch, but even with his full wages it would not be nearly enough. "The cattle drive to Dodge City pays a bonus," Buck Morrison mentioned one evening as the ranch hands were finishing up for the day. $100 bonus for every man who makes the full trip. It is dangerous work, and we lose some hands every year to accidents or men who just cannot handle the hardship. But if you are tough and smart, it is good money. $100. Combined with his regular wages, that would be a significant contribution to Willa's debt. "When does the drive leave?" Jacob asked. "End of June, 6 weeks on the trail, maybe 7 depending on weather and how the herd behaves. You interested?" "Yes," Jacob said without hesitation. When he told Willa that evening, she went pale. "Those drives are dangerous," she said. "Stampedes, river crossings, storms, not to mention outlaws and hostile Indians. Men die on the trail, Jacob." "I will be careful," he promised. $100 is a third of what you need. It is the best chance we have." "We," Willa repeated softly. "You keep saying we." Jacob met her eyes steadily. "This matters to you, so it matters to me. We are in this together." She crossed the distance between them and hugged him suddenly, fiercely. He wrapped his arms around her, feeling the way she fit against him, breathing in the scent of her hair. When she pulled back, there was color in her cheeks, and her eyes were bright. "Thank you," she said, "for caring, for being here, for being you, whoever you are." "I am just Jacob," he said. "Maybe I was someone else before, but right now I am just a man who wants to help the woman who saved his life." "You are more than that," Willa said quietly. "At least to me." The words hung between them, heavy with unspoken meaning. Jacob wanted to kiss her, wanted to pull her close and show her all the feelings building in his chest, but something held him back. He had no past to offer her, no certainty about who he was or where he came from. For all he knew, he had a wife somewhere, a whole other life waiting to reclaim him. Until he knew for certain, he could not ask Willa to bind herself to a man who might be a stranger even to himself. But the way she looked at him, the softness in her expression, made him hope that maybe, just maybe, she felt the same pull he did. June arrived with scorching heat and the frantic final preparations for the cattle drive. Jacob helped gather the herd, over 2,000 head of cattle that would make the journey north. The Rocking M was partnering with 2 other ranches for the drive, which meant a crew of 18 men, plus the trail boss and the cook. It was a massive undertaking, coordinating supplies, planning the route, making sure every man knew his responsibilities. Buck Morrison served as trail boss, and he ran a tight operation. "Listen up," he told the assembled crew the day before departure. "This drive will make or break us. We get these cattle to Dodge City in good condition, we all profit. We lose too many to stampedes or disease or stupidity. We all suffer. Every man here pulls his weight, follows orders, and watches out for his fellow drovers. We clear on that?" A chorus of affirmative responses rose from the men. Jacob felt the weight of responsibility settle on his shoulders. 6 weeks away from Willa, 6 weeks of danger and hard labor, but at the end of it, money that would help save her home. The night before the drive departed, Jacob and Willa sat on the back steps of the boarding house under a sky full of stars. The air was warm and still, carrying the distant sound of a piano from the saloon down the street. "I am scared," Willa admitted quietly. "I know you need to go. I know we need the money. But I am scared something will happen to you out there." "I will be careful," Jacob said. "I will think of you every day, and that will keep me safe." She turned to look at him, her face half in shadow. "When you come back," she said, and then hesitated. "When I come back?" he prompted. "When you come back, if you still feel the same way, if you still want to stay, I would like to talk about what this is between us. I know it is complicated, with your memory gone and the uncertainty of who you might be. But Jacob, these past months with you have been the happiest I have been since before my husband died. Maybe even happier than I was then, though it feels disloyal to say so. There is something between us. I know you feel it too." Jacob took her hand, lacing their fingers together. "I feel it," he said. "I think I have been falling in love with you since the day I woke up and saw you standing there. I did not want to say anything because of all the unknowns, because I was afraid of burdening you with a man who might have obligations I do not even remember. But yes, when I come back, we will talk about this. We will figure out how to build a future together." "Together," Willa echoed, and this time when he leaned in to kiss her, she met him halfway. The kiss was sweet and gentle, full of promise and hope. When they finally pulled apart, both were smiling. "You come back to me," Willa said fiercely. "You hear me, Jacob Frost, or whoever you are? You come back safe." "I will," he promised. "I have too much to come back to." The next morning, as the sun was just beginning to paint the eastern sky pink and gold, the cattle drive set out. Jacob sat on his horse at the edge of the herd, watching Sweetwater recede into the distance behind them. Somewhere in that town was Willa, standing at the window of her boarding house, watching him go. He touched his fingers to his hat in a silent salute, though he knew she could not see the gesture, and then turned his attention to the work ahead. The first days of the drive established the rhythm that would define the next weeks. Up before dawn, breakfast from the chuck wagon, then long hours in the saddle keeping the herd moving north. The cattle were temperamental, prone to spooking at shadows and sounds, and it took constant vigilance to keep them calm and moving in the right direction. The drovers rotated positions, taking turns at point, flank, and drag, the dusty position at the rear of the herd that left a man coughing and gritty by day's end. Jacob found himself partnered often with a young cowboy named Tommy Reeves, barely 20 years old, and full of enthusiasm for the adventure of the trail. Tommy talked constantly when they worked together, telling stories about his family's small ranch and his ambitions to save enough money to buy his own spread someday. "You got anyone waiting for you back in Sweetwater?" Tommy asked one day as they hazed a few straying cattle back toward the main herd. "Yes," Jacob said, and felt warmth spread through his chest at the thought of Willa. "A woman named Willa Turner. She saved my life, and I aim to spend the rest of my life returning the favor." Tommy grinned. "That sounds like love to me." "It is," Jacob admitted, "though it is complicated." "Love usually is," Tommy said with the confidence of youth. "But complicated or not, if you got someone worth coming home to, that is something special." The drive pushed north through Texas, crossing rivers swollen with spring runoff, navigating terrain that ranged from flat grassland to rocky hills. They passed through small settlements and gave wide berth to Indian territories, though they occasionally saw riders watching from distant ridges. Buck Morrison kept the crew on high alert, aware that a herd this size was a tempting target for rustlers or hostile forces. 3 weeks into the drive, they encountered their first serious challenge. Dark clouds had been building all afternoon, and by evening the sky was an ominous greenish black. The cattle were restless, sensing the coming storm, and Buck ordered the crew to prepare for trouble. "Cattle spook easy in storms," he told them. "If they stampede, stay with them, but do not get in front of the herd. Let them run themselves out, then we will round them up after. Priority is keeping yourselves alive, understood?" The storm hit with the force of a freight train. Lightning cracked across the sky, so bright it left after images, and thunder boomed loud enough to shake the ground. The cattle, already nervous, broke into a panicked run. Jacob found himself racing alongside the stampeding herd in near total darkness, relying on his horse's instincts to keep them from falling. The sound was deafening, thousands of hooves pounding the earth, cattle bellowing in terror, men shouting to be heard over the chaos. He spotted Tommy up ahead, his horse stumbling on the rough ground. Jacob kicked his own mount forward, reaching Tommy's side just as the young cowboy's horse went down. Jacob leaned far out of his saddle and grabbed Tommy's arm, hauling him across his own horse's neck in a move that would have been impossible if he had stopped to think about it. They rode that way for what felt like hours, but was probably only minutes, until the herd finally began to slow exhausted by their panicked flight. When the storm passed and the crew regrouped, they found they had lost about 50 head of cattle, scattered across miles of prairie. Buck Morrison's face was grim but not defeated. "Could have been worse," he said. "Everyone accounted for?" They were, though several men had injuries ranging from cuts and bruises to Tommy's sprained wrist from his fall. The crew spent the next 2 days rounding up as many of the scattered cattle as they could find, and by the time they resumed the drive north, they had recovered all but a dozen animals. "You saved my life back there," Tommy said to Jacob as they rode side by side. "I do not know how you moved that fast or managed to pull me up while both horses were running, but you saved my life." Jacob had been wondering the same thing. The maneuver had been pure instinct, his body reacting without thought. What kind of man had he been before to have such skills? "I am glad I was there," he said simply. "I am glad you are safe." The remainder of the drive was less dramatic, but no less demanding. They pushed through territory that seemed to stretch on forever, empty horizons and endless sky. Jacob found himself thinking of Willa constantly, replaying their last conversation, the sweetness of their kiss, the promise of a future together. He composed letters to her in his head during the long hours in the saddle, though he had no way to send them until they reached Dodge City. Finally, in the second week of August, the buildings of Dodge City appeared on the horizon. The cattle were trail-worn but in decent condition, and Buck Morrison allowed himself a rare smile. "We made it, boys. Good work, every one of you." Dodge City was everything Jacob had heard about and more, raucous and rough, full of saloons and gambling halls and establishments catering to cowboys with money to spend after months on the trail. Buck gave the crew 2 days to rest and enjoy themselves before they would begin the journey back to Texas, and most of the men headed straight for the saloons. Jacob found a quiet hotel instead, and paid for a room with a real bed and a bath. After washing away weeks of trail dust, he sat down and wrote a proper letter to Willa. "Dear Willa," he wrote, "we arrived safely in Dodge City today, and I will be heading home to you soon. The drive was hard, but I am well, and I will have the $100 bonus as promised. I thought of you every day, every mile. I thought about our last conversation and our kiss and the future we talked about building together. I do not know who I was before I met you, but I know who I am now. I am a man who loves you completely. I am a man who wants to spend his life making you happy. If you will have me, if you can accept a man with no past but a fierce commitment to our future, then I would be honored to be yours. I will be home in 3 weeks. Wait for me. Love, Jacob." He posted the letter the next morning and spent the rest of his time in Dodge City, helping to manage the sale of the cattle and prepare for the return journey. The drive had made a good profit, and every man received his promised bonus plus a little extra. Jacob carefully tucked his money away, planning already how it would help Willa pay down her debt. The return journey to Texas was faster without cattle to slow them down, though no less tiring. The crew rode hard, covering distances in days that had taken weeks on the drive north. Jacob found himself increasingly impatient as they drew closer to Sweetwater, eager to see Willa again, to hold her, and tell her everything that had happened. They arrived back at the Rocking M on the first day of September, trail-worn and exhausted, but triumphant. Buck Morrison paid out final wages and gave the crew 3 days off to rest. Jacob barely waited long enough to collect his money before saddling a fresh horse and riding hard for Sweetwater. It was late afternoon when he arrived at the boarding house. He dismounted quickly and took the steps 2 at a time, bursting through the door without knocking. "Willa!" She emerged from the kitchen, her eyes widening in surprise and joy. "Jacob, you are home!" He crossed the distance between them and pulled her into his arms, kissing her with all the pent-up longing of 6 weeks apart. She kissed him back just as fiercely, her hands fisting in his shirt as if to make sure he was real. When they finally broke apart, both were breathless and smiling. "I got your letter," Willa said. "It arrived 3 days ago, and I have read it 100 times. Did you mean what you said?" "Every word," Jacob confirmed. He pulled the money from his pocket, the $100 bonus plus his wages from the drive. "And I brought this. It is not everything you need, but it is a start." Willa took the money with trembling hands. "Jacob, this is too much. I cannot take all your wages." "You can and you will," he said firmly. "This place is your dream, your security. Helping you keep it is my priority." Tears filled her eyes. I have some good news too. I have had 3 steady boarders since you left, merchants who are working on a building project in town. They have paid in advance through October. Between that and your contribution, I have enough to make a substantial payment to the bank. It may not be the full amount, but it will show good faith and buy me more time. Then we will find a way to raise the rest, Jacob said. Together. Willa cupped his face in her hands. I have an answer to your letter, she said. To what you asked me. Yes, Jacob. Yes to all of it. I do not care that you have no memory of your past. The man you are now is the man I love. The man who works hard and keeps his promises and thinks of others before himself. The man who rode beside a stampeding herd to save a friend. The man who came back to me just like he promised. That is the man I want to build a future with. Jacob felt something settle in his chest, a sense of rightness and belonging he had not felt since waking with no memory. Marry me, he said. Not right away if you are not ready, but soon. Let me be your husband and your partner. Let me help you build this life you are creating. Yes, Willa said, smiling through her tears. Yes, I will marry you. They stood in the hallway of the boarding house, holding each other as the afternoon sun slanted through the windows. Jacob thought about the man he might have been before, the life he had lost, and found that he could not regret any of it. That unknown past had led him to this moment, to this woman, to this new beginning. The next morning, they went together to the bank to speak with Cyrus Dalton. The bank president was a portly man with shrewd eyes and an oily smile. He looked surprised to see Willa walk in with a man at her side. Miss Turner, he said, though Willa had corrected him multiple times about her married name. What can I do for you? I am here to make a payment on my loan, Willa said crisply. She placed a substantial stack of bills on his desk. $200. I will have the remainder to you within the month. Dalton's smile slipped. Miss Turner, the terms were quite clear, the full amount by the end of August. It is September 1st, Willa said. Barely past your deadline. I am here in good faith with a significant payment and a promise to pay the rest shortly. Surely you can accommodate that. I am afraid the terms have been set, Dalton began, but Jacob stepped forward. I think you will find that seizing property when the debtor is making good faith payments is a quick way to get a reputation as an unfair lender, Jacob said quietly. Small towns talk, Mr. Dalton. If word got around that you refuse reasonable accommodation to widows trying to pay their debts, it might hurt your business. On the other hand, if you work with Miss Turner, show yourself to be a fair and understanding banker, that is the kind of reputation that builds trust. Dalton's face reddened. Are you threatening me? I am offering you perspective, Jacob said mildly. Miss Turner is a respected businesswoman in this community. She is trying to do right by her obligations. The question is whether you will meet her halfway. For a long moment, Dalton stared at them both. Then he pulled the payment toward him and counted it carefully. Very well, he said grudgingly. You have until the end of September to pay the remaining balance, not a day longer. That is all we ask, Willa said with dignity. Thank you for your understanding. They left the bank together, and once they were outside, Willa let out a breath she had been holding. That was terrifying. You were magnificent, Jacob said, taking her hand. He is a bully and a cheat, but he backed down when confronted. We will get him the rest of his money, and then you will be free of him. True to their word, they spent September working tirelessly to raise the remaining $100. Jacob took on extra work wherever he could find it, from mending fences to hauling supplies for the general store. Willa's boarding house stayed full with the merchants and a few additional travelers. They combined every penny they earned, living frugally, focused on their goal. On September 28th, they walked back into the bank and placed the final payment on Cyrus Dalton's desk. The banker's face was sour as he counted the money and prepared a receipt marking the loan as paid in full. There, Willa said with quiet triumph, we are square. The property is mine, clear and free. Dalton said nothing, merely thrust the receipt at her. They left the bank with their heads high, and once they were out of sight around the corner, Willa let out a whoop of joy. Jacob picked her up and spun her around, both of them laughing with relief and happiness. We did it, Willa said, her eyes shining. We actually did it. You did it, Jacob corrected. I just helped. We did it together, Willa insisted. Just like we will do everything from now on, together. They were married the first week of October, in a simple ceremony at the Sweetwater Church. Willa wore a dress of pale blue that brought out her eyes, and Jacob wore his best clothes, which were not fancy, but were clean and neatly mended. The ceremony was attended by a small group of friends from town, including Dr. Hendricks and Buck Morrison, and even young Tommy Reeves. The preacher spoke about love and commitment and the blessing of finding a partner to walk through life with. When it came time to exchange vows, Jacob held Willa's hands and spoke from his heart. "I came to you with nothing, not even my own name. You gave me a home and purpose and love. I promise to spend every day of my life being worthy of that gift. I promise to work beside you, to support your dreams, to be your partner in every way that matters. I may not remember who I was before, but I know exactly who I want to be now. I want to be your husband, your love, your home, as you have become mine." Willa's voice was thick with emotion when she spoke her own vows. "You appeared in my life when I needed someone most, though I did not know it at the time. You showed me what true partnership looks like, what it means to have someone who sees you as an equal and a teammate. You are the best man I have ever known, Jacob, and I am honored to be your wife. You became my new memory and my home, and I promise to be the same for you, today and always." The preacher pronounced them husband and wife, and when Jacob kissed Willa, he felt the last pieces of his new life click into place. The past did not matter. This was his life now, this woman, this town, this future they would build together. The reception was held at the boarding house, which Willa had decorated with wildflowers and ribbons. Someone had brought a fiddle, and there was dancing in the main room, lively and joyful. Jacob found himself pulled into conversation, after conversation, with well-wishers, people who had come to know him over the past months and accepted him as one of their own. "You done good, son," Buck Morrison said, clapping Jacob on the shoulder. "Miss Willa, I mean Mrs. Frost now, is a fine woman. You take care of her." "I intend to," Jacob promised. As the evening wore on and the guests gradually departed, Jacob and Willa found themselves alone in the boarding house that was now truly their shared home. Willa had moved Jacob's few belongings into her room weeks ago in anticipation of this night, and they climbed the stairs together, fingers intertwined. The next month settled into a comfortable rhythm. Jacob continued working at the Rocking M, though he now had the security of a permanent position and steady wages. Willa ran the boarding house with skill and efficiency, and with the loan paid off, the income from her boarders went toward improvements and savings. They worked as a team, discussing decisions, planning for the future, building their life together one day at a time. As winter approached and the work at the ranch slowed, Jacob spent more time at the boarding house, helping with repairs and maintenance. He proved handy with carpentry and by Christmas had built additional shelves in the kitchen and repaired the front steps that had been sagging for over a year. "You are good at this," Willa observed, watching him work. "Did you build things in your previous life, do you think?" Jacob had thought about his past less and less as the months went by. The mystery of who he had been had faded in importance compared to who he was becoming. "Maybe," he said, "or maybe I'm just learning as I go. Either way, I enjoy it." Christmas was quiet but warm, celebrated with a few of the boarders who had nowhere else to go, and some neighbors from town. Willa cooked a feast, and Jacob surprised her with a gift he had been working on in secret, a wooden jewelry box he had carved with an intricate design of prairie flowers. "Jacob, this is beautiful," Willa breathed, running her fingers over the smooth wood. "You made this?" "I wanted you to have something special," he said, "something just for you." She kissed him sweetly. "I do not need things, my love. I just need you." "Well, you have me," Jacob said, pulling her close. "For always." As 1882 turned into 1883, they received their first piece of surprising news. Willa had been feeling unwell for a few weeks, tired and queasy, and when Dr. Hendricks examined her, he emerged with a broad smile. "Congratulations," he told them both. "You are going to be parents. The baby should arrive in late summer, if my calculations are correct." Jacob felt a wave of emotion so intense he had to sit down. A baby, a child, a family. Willa sat beside him, taking his hand, her own face a mix of joy and nervousness. "We are going to have a baby," she said, as if testing the words. "We are going to have a baby," Jacob repeated, and then he was laughing, pulling her into his arms. "We are going to be parents." The pregnancy progressed smoothly. Willa continued running the boarding house with help from Jacob and a young woman named Sarah she hired part-time. As spring arrived and then summer, Willa's belly grew round, and Jacob found himself constantly amazed by the miracle of it all. He would rest his hand on her stomach and feel the baby kick, marveling at the life they had created together. In late August, as the heat pressed down heavy and thick, Willa went into labor. Jacob paced the hallway outside their room, while Dr. Hendricks attended to her, accompanied by Sarah and a midwife named Mrs. Cooper. The sounds coming from the room were frightening, Willa's cries of pain making Jacob want to break down the door and demand to be let in. Finally, after what felt like days but was probably only hours, he heard a new sound. A baby's cry, thin and reedy and beautiful. The door opened and Dr. Hendricks emerged, tired but smiling. "You have a son," he said, "a healthy boy, and your wife did wonderfully. She is tired but well. You can go in now." Jacob entered the room on shaky legs. Willa lay in the bed, exhausted and sweat-soaked and radiant. In her arms was a tiny bundle wrapped in a soft blanket. Jacob approached slowly, awed by the sight. "Come meet your son," Willa said softly. Jacob sat on the edge of the bed and looked down at the baby. He was impossibly small, with a tuft of dark hair and a red wrinkled face. As Jacob watched, the baby opened his eyes and seemed to look directly at him. "Hello," Jacob whispered. "Hello, little one. I am your father." "What should we name him?" Willa asked. They had discussed names but never settled on anything definite. Jacob thought about it now, looking at his son. "What about William?" he suggested. "After your father." Willa's eyes filled with tears. Her father had died when she was young, but she had loved him dearly. "William," she repeated. "William Frost. I think that is perfect." Baby William proved to be a good baby, sleeping in reasonable stretches and feeding well. Jacob found himself completely besotted, happy to walk the floor with his son when he was fussy, to change diapers, to do whatever was needed. The boarders were tolerant of the baby's occasional crying, and more than one gruff cowboy was seen making faces to try to get William to smile. Life continued its steady rhythm. William grew from an infant to a chubby, smiling baby who laughed at everything and reached for his father whenever Jacob entered the room. Jacob continued working at the ranch, though he cut back his hours to spend more time at home helping with the baby in the boarding house. Willa was an excellent mother, patient and loving, and watching her with their son made Jacob fall in love with her all over again every day. One evening when William was about 8 months old, Jacob was playing with the baby on the floor when a sudden sharp pain lanced through his head. He gasped, pressing his hand to his temple, and for a moment the world went sideways. Images flashed through his mind. A woman's face, but not Willa's face. A house he did not recognize. The feeling of holding reins as a stagecoach raced down a dusty road. Men with guns drawn. A gunshot. Pain. "Jacob?" Willa's voice seemed to come from far away. "Jacob, what is wrong?" The images faded as quickly as they had come, leaving Jacob disoriented and shaken. "I remembered something," he said slowly. "I think I remembered something from before." Willa sat beside him, William on her lap. "What did you see?" "I am not sure. Flashes, fragments. I think I drove a stagecoach. I think there was a robbery." He pressed his hands to his head, trying to grasp at the fading memories. "There was a woman, but I do not think she was my wife. A sister, maybe, and men with guns." "The letter," Willa said. "The one addressed to Jacob Frost mentioned a sister named Margaret." "Yes," Jacob said. "Yes, that feels right. Margaret is my sister. I was going to see her, to see our mother who was dying. And there was a robbery. The stagecoach was attacked, and I fought back, and someone hit me on the head, and that is the last clear thing I remember." He looked at Willa, suddenly afraid. "What if I have people looking for me? What if I have responsibilities, obligations?" Willa set William down in his cradle and took both of Jacob's hands. "Then we will deal with them together. But Jacob, listen to me. You are not that person anymore. Whatever you were before, whatever life you had, it is gone. You built a new life here. You are my husband and William's father. You are Jacob Frost of Sweetwater, Texas. That is who you are." "But what if someone comes looking for me?" Jacob asked. "Then we will handle it when it happens," Willa said firmly. "But you are not going anywhere. This is your home. We are your family. Do you understand?" Jacob took a shaky breath and nodded. Yes, you are right. This is my home. You and William are my family. Everything else is just shadows." Over the following weeks, more memories trickled back, but they were fractured and incomplete. Jacob remembered driving coaches for a stage line in Arizona territory. He remembered his sister Margaret, younger than him by several years, and their difficult relationship with a critical, demanding mother. He remembered the robbery, 3 men with bandanas over their faces stopping the stage, demanding the strongbox. He had fought back, not willing to surrender without resistance, and one of the men had clubbed him hard enough to knock him from the driver's seat. After that, nothing until waking in Willa's boarding house. "So you were a stage driver named Jacob Frost," Willa said when he had told her everything he could remember. "That part was real at least. But I have no memory of coming to Texas or how I ended up on that road outside Sweetwater," Jacob said. "The gaps are as big as what I remember." "Does it matter?" Willa asked gently. "You know your name now. You know you had a sister and a mother. Does knowing more change who you are today?" "No," Jacob admitted. "It does not. This is still my life, here with you." But the return memories, fragmentary as they were, nagged at him. He wondered about Margaret, whether she had ever received his response to her letter, whether their mother had died, not knowing if her son would come. He wondered if anyone in Arizona territory was searching for him, worrying about his fate. Finally, he decided to write a letter. He addressed it to Margaret Frost in care of the stage line he remembered working for, hoping it would find its way to her. He explained briefly what had happened, that he had been injured and lost his memory, that he had built a new life in Texas. He told her about Willa and William, about the boarding house and his work at the ranch. He invited her to write back if she wished, to let him know how she was, but he made it clear that he would not be returning to Arizona. Months passed with no response. Jacob assumed the letter had not found Margaret, or that she had chosen not to reply. He focused on his family, on watching William grow and develop, on supporting Willa in running the boarding house, on his work at the ranch. Life was good, full of simple pleasures and steady contentment. Then, on a crisp October morning in 1884, over 2 years after Jacob had first woken with no memory, a woman arrived at the boarding house asking for Jacob Frost. Jacob was in the barn behind the house, repairing a broken wagon wheel, when Willa came to get him. "There is someone here to see you," she said, her expression unreadable. A woman named Margaret Foster. Jacob's heart lurched. Margaret, his sister. He followed Willa back to the house, where a woman in traveling clothes waited in the parlor. She was in her early 20s, with brown hair and the same gray eyes Jacob saw in his own mirror. When she saw him, her hand flew to her mouth. "Jacob," she breathed, "it is really you. I was not sure from the letter if it was truly you or some kind of cruel hoax." "It is me," Jacob confirmed. "Hello, Margaret. I am sorry if my letter caused you worry." She crossed the room and hugged him hard. "I thought you were dead. When you did not arrive and did not send word, I thought the worst. The stage line said you had quit and taken your last wages and disappeared. I did not know what to think." "I honestly do not remember much after the robbery," Jacob said. "I woke up here in Sweetwater with no memory of how I got here or who I was. If not for my wife, I would probably have died." Margaret pulled back and looked at Willa, who stood watching the reunion with guarded eyes. "Your wife. The letter mentioned her, but I did not fully understand. You married?" "Yes," Jacob said, reaching for Willa's hand. "This is Willa Frost. She saved my life, and I love her more than I can say. We have a son, William. He is napping upstairs, but you will meet him soon." Margaret's eyes filled with tears. "I am happy for you, truly. It is just such a shock. You disappeared and I grieved for you, and now here you are with a whole new life." "Come sit," Willa said, her voice softening. "You must be tired from traveling. Can I get you some coffee, something to eat?" Over coffee and sandwiches, Margaret told them her story. Their mother had died 2 days after Margaret had sent her letter to Jacob. She had been buried in a small cemetery outside Tucson. Margaret had married a few months later to a kind man named Thomas Foster, who ran a dry goods store. They had a daughter now, almost a year old. "I am happy," Margaret said, "but I never stopped wondering what happened to you. Your letter finally arrived just last month. It had been sitting at the old stage depot for over a year, forwarded wrong a dozen times. I came as soon as I could arrange travel." "How long can you stay?" Jacob asked. "A few days," Margaret said. Thomas is managing the store, but he cannot be away from it long. I wanted to see you, to know you were truly alive and well." Margaret's visit was bittersweet. She stayed at the boarding house for 3 days, during which time she got to know Willa and fell in love with baby William. The siblings talked for hours, filling in pieces of each other's lives, sharing memories of their childhood. "I do not remember everything," Jacob admitted. "The memories come in fragments, but I remember you were always kind to me, even when Mother was hard on us both." "She loved you in her way," Margaret said. "She just did not know how to show it. I think she was proud of you, though she never said it." On the day Margaret left to return to Arizona, the siblings embraced on the platform at the stagecoach depot. "You have a good life here," Margaret said. "A wife who loves you, a beautiful son, honest work. I am so glad you found this, Jacob." "I am sorry I was not there for you when Mother died," Jacob said. "I am sorry you had to go through that alone." "You were hurt and lost," Margaret said. "There is nothing to forgive, but please stay in touch. Write to me. Let our children know each other, even if only through letters." "I will," Jacob promised. "I promise." After Margaret left, Willa found Jacob standing on the back steps of the boarding house, looking out at the Texas sky. She slipped her arms around him from behind, resting her cheek against his back. "Are you all right?" she asked. "I am," Jacob said. "Seeing Margaret, learning about my mother's death, it brought closure I did not know I needed. That part of my life is finished. This is my life now, here with you and William. I do not have any doubts about that." "Good," Willa said, "because I would be very upset if you tried to leave." Jacob turned in her arms and kissed her. "I am never leaving. You are my home, Willa. You and William. You are everything that matters." Time continued its steady march. William grew from a baby into a toddler, curious and energetic, constantly exploring his world. The boarding house thrived under Willa and Jacob's joint management. Jacob's skills as a carpenter had developed to the point where he took on projects beyond the boarding house, building furniture and doing repairs for people around Sweetwater. He still worked at the Rocking M during busy seasons, but his carpentry brought in steady additional income. In the spring of 1886, Willa discovered she was pregnant again. This time, the news was met with calm joy rather than nervous excitement. They knew what to expect, had the confidence of experienced parents. "A brother or sister for William," Willa said, smiling as Jacob rested his hand on her still flat stomach. "What do you think he will make of that?" "I think he will be a wonderful big brother," Jacob said, "just like we will manage beautifully with 2. The pregnancy progressed smoothly, and in November, Willa gave birth to a daughter they named Rose, for the wild roses that grew in Willa's garden. William, now a bright 3-year-old, was fascinated by his tiny sister and insisted on helping with everything from bringing diapers to singing her lullabies. Their family was complete, their life full and rich with love and purpose. Jacob still occasionally had flashes of memory from his old life, but they no longer disturbed him. He was Jacob Frost, husband, father, carpenter, rancher. He was a man with a past he barely remembered and a present he treasured with every fiber of his being. On their 5th wedding anniversary, Jacob and Willa stole an evening alone while Sarah watched the children. They walked through Sweetwater as the sun set, hand in hand, comfortable in the silence between them. "Do you ever regret it?" Jacob asked. "Taking in a stranger with no memory, tying your life to someone with so many unknowns?" Willa stopped walking and turned to face him. "Not for a single moment. You gave me more than I ever dreamed of having. A true partner, a loving father for our children, a man who sees me as an equal. You woke with no memory of your former life, but you became my new memory and my home. Everything good in my life traces back to the day I found you on that road." "I fell in love with you the first time I saw you," Jacob confessed, standing there with that basin of water, looking at me with such kindness. "I did not know my name or where I came from, but I knew I never wanted to be without you." "Then it is a good thing you stayed," Willa said, smiling. "I am exactly where I am supposed to be," Jacob said, pulling her close. "With you, with our children, in this life we built together. I would not change a single thing." They kissed as the Texas sunset painted the sky in shades of gold and rose. 2 people who had found each other against all odds and built something beautiful from the ashes of what came before. The years flowed on, bringing the usual joys and challenges of life. William grew into a serious, thoughtful boy who loved books and helping his father with carpentry projects. Rose was all energy and laughter, constantly into mischief, and charming her way out of trouble. The boarding house continued to be a steady source of income, with Willa running it with the help of Sarah, who had become a trusted friend as much as an employee. Jacob's carpentry business expanded until he was well known throughout the region for his quality work. He built tables and chairs, cabinets and bed frames, even designed and built an addition onto the church when the congregation needed more space. The work was satisfying in a deep way, creating things with his hands that would last, that would be used and treasured by families for generations. In 1889, when William was 6 and Rose was 2, Margaret wrote with news that she and her family were moving to Texas. Thomas had been offered a partnership in a general store in San Angelo, about 100 miles from Sweetwater. The sisters-in-law had maintained a correspondence over the years and had developed a genuine friendship through their letters. "It will be wonderful to have family nearby," Willa said, reading the letter aloud to Jacob. "The children can actually meet their cousins." "A new chapter," Jacob said, pleased. "I never thought I would have any connection to my old life, but having Margaret close feels right." Margaret and her family arrived in San Angelo in May, and by June they had settled enough for a visit. Margaret and Thomas came to Sweetwater with their daughter Emma, now a shy 5-year-old, and a baby boy named Christopher. The cousins were awkward with each other at first, but by the end of the weekend, William and Emma were fast friends, and Rose was doing her best to keep up with the older children. "You have done well for yourself," Thomas Foster said to Jacob as they sat on the porch watching the children play. "Margaret has told me the story of how you came to be here. It is remarkable." "I am a lucky man," Jacob agreed. "To have lost everything and found even more in return is a blessing I do not take lightly." As the 1880s gave way to the 1890s, Sweetwater grew and changed. The railroad came through, connecting the town to larger markets and bringing new settlers. Jacob and Willa watched their children grow, William showing an aptitude for mathematics and business, Rose displaying an artistic talent that led to drawing and painting filling every spare surface in the house. On a warm evening in October of 1892, as the family sat down to dinner, William made an announcement. "I have been thinking about what I want to do when I grow up," the 9-year-old said seriously. "I want to be a builder like Papa, but building whole houses, not just furniture. I want to build homes for families." Jacob felt his chest swell with pride. "That is a fine ambition, son. I will teach you everything I know." "And I," Rose piped up, not to be outdone by her brother, "am going to be an artist. I will paint pictures that everyone wants to buy." "I have no doubt you will," Willa said, smiling at her passionate daughter. After dinner, when the children were in bed, Jacob and Willa sat together on the porch as they did most evenings. The night was clear and cool, stars scattered across the black velvet sky. "We have built something good here," Willa said softly. "Sometimes I look at our life, and I can hardly believe it is real." "It is real," Jacob assured her, taking her hand. "And it is ours. Every day I wake up grateful for the twist of fate that brought me to you." "No memory of your former life, but you created a new life worth remembering," Willa said. "I think that is its own kind of miracle." "You are my miracle," Jacob said. "You save me in every way a person can be saved. You gave me purpose and love and family. You gave me a home." "We gave each other a home," Willa corrected gently. "That is what partnership means." Time continued forward, and the Frost family continued to thrive. In 1895, Jacob was asked to serve on the town council, recognition of his standing in the community. He served for 3 years, working to improve schools and infrastructure in Sweetwater. Willa expanded the boarding house by purchasing the adjacent property when it came up for sale, adding 4 more rooms and turning the business into one of the most successful in town. William, true to his word, apprenticed with a builder when he turned 16, learning the trade of construction. Rose's artistic talents led to her work being displayed in the general store and eventually selling to collectors throughout the region. Both children were healthy and happy, growing into capable young adults. On their 15th wedding anniversary, Jacob surprised Willa with a gift that represented months of secret work. He led her outside to where a beautiful porch swing hung from the rafters, carved with an intricate design that depicted their story. There was a woman finding a man on a road, a boarding house, a man on horseback, a family with 2 children, all woven together in an artwork of stunning detail. "Jacob," Willa breathed, running her hands over the carved images. "This is incredible. How did you do this without me knowing?" "I worked on it at the ranch during my lunch breaks," Jacob admitted. "I wanted to create something that showed our journey, everything we have been through together." Willa sat on the swing, testing its strength, then pulled Jacob down beside her. "I love it. I love you. 15 years, and I love you more now than I did on our wedding day." "The feeling is mutual," Jacob said, wrapping his arm around her. "You are still the first thing I think of when I wake up and the last thing I think of before I sleep. You became my home, Willa, and there is nowhere else I would rather be." They sat together on the swing as the sun set over Sweetwater, two people who had found each other in the most unlikely of circumstances and built a life of meaning and love. The swing would remain on that porch for decades, holding grandchildren and great-grandchildren, a testament to the love story that began with a man who woke with no memory and a woman who became his everything. In 1899, William married a young woman named Anna Richardson, a teacher at the Sweetwater School. The wedding was a grand affair with most of the town attending. Jacob walked his son down the aisle with pride and joy, remembering his own wedding day and hoping William and Anna would find the same happiness he and Willa had shared. Rose, at 13, was already turning heads with her beauty and talent. She had received a commission to paint a mural in the church, depicting scenes from the Bible in her distinctive style. Willa watched both their children with maternal pride, amazed at the people they were becoming. "We did good," Jacob said one evening, as they watched Rose carefully mix paints for her mural. "We did very good," Willa agreed. The new century arrived with celebration and hope. Sweetwater threw a party to welcome 1900, and the Frost family attended together, joined by Margaret and Thomas and their children from San Angelo. As midnight struck and fireworks lit up the Texas sky, Jacob held Willa close and thought about the journey that had brought him to this moment. 18 years since he had woken with no memory. 18 years of building a life with the woman who had saved him in every way possible. He had no regrets about the past he could not remember, only gratitude for the present he had created. In 1902, William and Anna had their first child, a boy they named Jacob after his grandfather. The day Willa placed the baby in Jacob's arms, he felt emotions he could not name. This child carried his name, carried on his legacy, represented the future of the family he and Willa had built from nothing. "Hello, little Jacob," he whispered to the baby. "Welcome to the world. You have a good family and a good name. I hope you will wear both with pride." More grandchildren followed over the years. William and Anna had 3 children in total, 2 boys and a girl. Rose married at 19 to a rancher named David Porter, and they eventually had 4 children, who kept Willa and Jacob busy with visits and adventures. As Jacob entered his 50s and then his 60s, his pace slowed, but his contentment only deepened. He still did carpentry work, though now he focused on teaching William's oldest son the trade rather than taking on large projects himself. The boarding house thrived under Willa's management, and she eventually turned over day-to-day operations to Sarah while maintaining ownership. On a summer evening in 1910, Jacob and Willa celebrated their 30th wedding anniversary, surrounded by children, grandchildren, and friends. A banner stretched across the porch of the boarding house proclaimed 30 years of love, and tables were laden with food and cake. Jacob stood to make a toast, his hair now silver, but his eyes still bright. 30 years ago, I married the most remarkable woman I have ever known. She took in a stranger with nothing but questions and gave him everything that matters. She gave me purpose and home and family. She gave me love. Every good thing in my life traces back to Willa, to my wife, my partner, my home. "To Willa!" everyone chorused, raising their glasses. Willa stood beside him, still beautiful despite the silver in her hair and the lines on her face. "And to Jacob," she said, "who woke with no memory of his former life, but created new memories more precious than any that came before. You became my home, my love, my everything. Here is to 30 more years." They kissed to applause and cheering from their gathered family, and as the party continued around them, they slipped away to sit on their carved porch swing, the one that told their story in wood and artistry. 30 years, Willa marveled. "Sometimes it feels like yesterday, and sometimes it feels like we have been together forever." "Both are true," Jacob said. "Every day with you is new and exciting, but you are also so fundamental to who I am that I cannot imagine existence without you." "Good," Willa said, leaning her head on his shoulder. because you are stuck with me for the rest of our days." "There is nowhere I would rather be," Jacob said, and meant it with his whole heart. The years continued to pass, bringing the joys and sorrows that mark any long life. They lost friends to age and illness. They celebrated marriages and births. They watched their grandchildren grow and begin families of their own. Through it all, Jacob and Willa remained each other's constant, facing every challenge together, celebrating every triumph side by side. In 1918, as the world recovered from war and Spanish flu, Jacob fell ill. The doctor was frank about his prognosis. At nearly 70 years old and with a weak heart, Jacob's time was limited. He took the news calmly, more concerned about Willa than about himself. "I am not ready to lose you," Willa said fiercely, holding his hand as he lay in their bed. 36 years is not enough." "No amount of time would be enough," Jacob said. "But Willa, what a life we have had. What a beautiful, incredible life. I have no regrets except that I will leave you." "You are not leaving me yet," Willa insisted. "You will fight this." He did fight, rallying enough to see one more Christmas with their family gathered around. But in January of 1919, Jacob Frost passed away peacefully in his sleep, Willa holding his hand. The funeral was attended by what seemed like everyone in Sweetwater and beyond. Jacob had touched countless lives through his kindness, his work, his quiet generosity. Person after person stood to share stories of how Jacob had helped them, taught them, made their lives better. William spoke for the family. "My father came to us with nothing, not even his own memories, but he built a life that mattered. He loved deeply, worked honestly, and treated everyone with respect and kindness. He was the best father, grandfather, and husband anyone could ask for. We will miss him every day, but we will honor his memory by living the way he taught us to live, with love and purpose." Willa stood at Jacob's grave long after everyone else had left, staring at the headstone that read, "Jacob Frost, beloved husband, father, and friend, 1848-1919. 37 years since she had found him on that road, bloodied and unconscious. 37 years of love and partnership and building a life together. Thank you," she whispered, "for every day, every moment. You became my home, my love, and I will carry you in my heart until we meet again." Willa lived another 8 years, surrounded by family, still sharp and active despite her age. She told and retold the story of how she had found Jacob, how he had woken with no memory, but had built a life worth remembering. She spoke of their love with such warmth and joy that even those who had never met Jacob felt like they knew him. When Willa passed away in 1927, she was buried beside Jacob in the Sweetwater Cemetery. Their shared headstone bore the inscription their children had chosen: "Two souls who found each other and built a home in love." The boarding house remained in the family for generations, eventually being converted into a museum celebrating the history of Sweetwater. The carved porch swing was carefully preserved, displayed in a place of honor, and visitors would run their hands over the carved figures, depicting a love story that began with loss and ended in legacy. William's children and Rose's children told their children the story of their grandparents, how a man with no memory had found a woman with a generous heart, and together they had created something beautiful. The Frost name continued through the generations, each member carrying forward the values of love, partnership, and building a life that matters. And on summer evenings in Sweetwater, Texas, if you listened carefully, you might hear the creak of a porch swing moving in the breeze, carrying the echo of a love story that proved home is not a place, but the person who holds your heart, the person who becomes your memory and your future when you have nothing else. Jacob had woken with no memory of his former life, but in Willa he had found his new memory and his home, and together they had built something that would outlast them both, a legacy of love that would never be forgotten.